We had approximately 19 participants in a roundtable that was looking at whether we could establish a Dutch-Namibian sort of green hydrogen center. Now, all parties in the room had agreed that there is such a need for such a center to sort of exchange information, know what is existing, and where there are more opportunities. The roundtable also recognized that such a center could have two legs. One leg is for R&D, skills development, and know-how exchange. In this regard, we have already started to make strides in this and had actually signed some letters of intent and MOUs today. Another leg, however, is for private sector to connect to each other and also be connected with the public sectors. So there is a need for coordination both on the Dutch side and on the Namibian side. On the Namibian side, there was recognition that there are already various actors and stakeholder groups existing in Namibia, but there is a need for prioritization and the scope of areas of cooperation to be defined. So, although there are also various Dutch companies out there who were not present today and that there is a need to reach them, the roundtable concluded that perhaps we should start also with a virtual platform to connect the various parties together. One example was, for instance, an app, and this could possibly be housed in an organization identified within Namibia, such as, for instance, the Investment Promotion Development Board. Thank you.
We need to report out on the roundtable discussion on green hydrogen Blue Sport development support endeavors. Well-attended workshop with a clear overall message with regards to the high aspirational levels to this development opportunity. And I think we distinguished a number of issues. One is that it's quite essential that it's a rules-based environment. So regulation, certification, legislation is all a prerequisite to success. Then if one does appreciate the mere fact that this is a full value chain development from generating green electrons to producing green hydrogen to shipment, transport, certification, identification, storage at the other end, customer base, transportation, etc. We need to work along that value chain, and various Dutch and Namibian parties together are actually capable of endorsing this project and supporting the project. So we do believe that it starts with the infrastructure, because if you have one piece of the value chain ready and the other bits and pieces is not and are not ready yet, then you have a stranded asset and you will never be able to make the returns required. So it's essential that we have an overall and overarching project plan with clear timelines, roles, responsibilities, deliverables, in order to get to the various stages on time and on budget, of course. So that requires a master plan. I think, again, Dutch companies present together with the Namibian companies that are hosting us so kindly are and have embraced that intent to build on the master plan and deliver the necessary steps. The endeavor by the various companies will assure expertise that is present for all these elements in the value chain. So this is much more an issue of identifying a coalition of the willing than identifying the mother of all coalitions, because we need people at the table that have a competency and capability to deliver on the challenges. I think what we as Dutch companies would hope to be able to offer is decades and decades of experience in working in a public-private partnership. It's one of the things that has enabled the Netherlands to have such an efficient infrastructure, whether it's the port infrastructure as a port industrial facility, or whether it's our gas and to be converted pipeline of a hydrogen pipeline infrastructure in the country, or whether it's our financing schemes. So we look forward to leveraging the public-private partnership. We also identified that EU financing is available together with Invest International, Dutch Invest International, but also EU financing is clearly available. And at the end of the day, I think we wrapped it up after an hours of discussion. I think it was my pleasure to appreciate the full confirmation of everyone attending that in the end, the reason we are conducting this exercise, and in the end, because why it is that we're so enthusiastic, is because it will enable us to deliver development to Namibia, it will enable us to deliver jobs to Namibia, it will enable us to deliver prosperity to Namibia, and it will enable us to set up not only a domestic use of hydrogen and the generation of a new economy and industrialization, but also welcoming those green hydrogen molecules to Europe, which we need so much, not only in between now and 2030, but also from 2030 to 2050 onwards. So the extent that we could set up this value chain, show how it should be done, we're all very excited and we look forward to contributing. Thank you very much.
So our discussion, which is focused on green mobility, very quickly focused on decarbonizing the transport corridors, the long-haul trucking between different countries here in the region. And of course, as most of you know, electric vehicles can't do it because their technology is not suitable for that. So here's a very clear, there are certain issues. For example, these trucks, they're of course diesel trucks at the moment. And replacing all this entire fleet with hydrogen trucks will be extremely expensive. It will be prohibitively expensive, actually. But I have also some good news, and that's in the Netherlands, together with DAF, Tjin-a has developed a technology that can retrofit old diesel trucks far more cheaply than you have to replace the whole thing. So this might be actually an area of cooperation that we can consider. Second, of course, you will have to get rid of or retrofit the whole infrastructure of fuel stations, which is also a big task. But that also might give you some opportunities, because if you can change them into hydrogen fuel service stations, and then get the wind and solar in there, and then maybe let them be owned by the local population, it might even be an economic boon for them. So that's a very interesting thing as well. Also, something that was discussed was the legal situation, which is not very clear at the moment, and that might be an impediment to further progress. We all agreed that what is necessary is a feasibility study, because this is all in its infancy, and we really have to get to know what all the obstacles are and how much it will cost and how much time it will cost us also. I guess we agreed that the governments in charge of this region should be the ones that initiate this. But then, of course, with all the companies that are involved in this as well, and also Tjin-a would be involved, would like to be involved to especially think of the more economic and technical stuff. So that was it. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, good afternoon. We were exploring the feasibility of Namibia as a synthetic fuel hub, I would say, in the southern hemisphere. And we said, what do we need to look at to assess whether it's feasible? And we've really made 4 main key considerations. One is the input resources. And given that green hydrogen is fairly established as a resource in Namibia, we said the second resource, which is CO2, could be sourced from biomass, local biomass, and there's been a lot of research already to validate the feasibility and availability of the resource. What needs to be validated, however, is the qualification and expectation in terms of making sure this biomass is as green as possible in presenting that. And given that Namibia has abundant resources in terms of solar and green hydrogen, we believe the process of producing the CO2 from biomass as a primary resource can possibly be validated as a green generated CO2 resource effectively that can then be merged with the green hydrogen to produce the synthetic fuel. The second factor we've taken in consideration is Namibia as an investment destination. Security of investments is important for any investor. Nobody wants to place their investment in a place where 6 months later there's disruption and they need to demobilize what they have mobilized. And that is what Namibia presents as a case. We have very friendly relations, basically with most countries globally. I think as is evident today in this process, the bilateral and multilateral engagements that Namibia have are actually paving a way for private sector investment to basically go on a carpet that is easier and smoother in terms of promoting investments. Therefore, we say that this particular support that is currently happening now is an affirmation of that. The third thing we've looked at is demand, and we said, look, there is adequate global demand in terms of large off-takers, mainly in the northern hemisphere. Regionally, there's integration that can happen on offtake to some degree, and I think Sasol is a good case to cite here. As an industrial producer of synthetic fuels that can convert into green synthetic fuels generation. But of course, there will be a level of small demand, but ultimately, the scale in terms of market demand can definitely mitigate the cost of investment to make this a very feasible investment. But there are other alternative markets, especially off-takers that may want to take up the synthetic fuels and promote that as a carbon offsetting mechanism. The fourth point that we've realized is infrastructure, and as was mentioned by previous speakers, the need to look at infrastructure investment, and the current MOU under discussion between NAMCOR and Rotterdam is a good business case to ensure that as the ecosystem is being unpacked, it also takes consideration for the possibility of inbounding and outbounding CO2 or the final product as synthetic fuels. We take note of the fact that the green valleys are very far from the primary source of biomass, but there could be other efficient measures, such as looking at what already happened or is already being developed with other bilateral partners, such as the German government through GIZ, with the development of the biomass industrial park. So therefore, we're saying we're not starting at ground zero. There is some work that's already done, and there's an opportunity to build on this. In the scope of that, we're saying that to move forward, there has been a level of emphasis already on skill development, and the gap you've seen from the young lady that's spoken forward. Namibia needs a lot of support, and as well as from Desperate, that we need support in promoting and taking along youth and creating opportunities for them to be skilled. The second thing that we've said as a condition precedent is obviously more feasibilities in affirming some of these business cases, but from a high-level perspective, there is definitely a good business case to say it's worth making the investment. Therefore, as we move forward, it is important then to make sure that the partnerships that are being developed with partners that recognize reciprocity as well as the value that local participants can bring to the table. Namibia has established itself as a competitive market for developing resources, including synthetic fuels, and therefore there is need to ensure that the local market value add is optimized to the extent that we're looking at final products and build with partners that wants to move along, not just in terms of financial returns, but also social returns.
So thank you for having me. What was it, a minute and a half? Okay, you better buckle up, because we had a very lively discussion with very concrete proposal and understanding of the issues at hand if we want to strengthen the sustainable energy generation in Namibia. So first of all, we concluded that we were the most important group because without any energy generation, there will be no hydrogen production in Namibia, and there will be no energy security either. The good news is that Namibia probably has one of the best renewable resources in the world. The sun, obviously, the wind, and biomass as well. The bad news is that we don't have projects, bankable projects enough in the books to make this happen. And this is what we focused on to in order to identify the challenges and the possibilities out there. First of all, what does it take to attract the investments needed to generate this kind of energy? Regulatory stability and political support is crucial, everybody agreed, including the private investors, that we have that in Namibia. So this is to your credit that this looks very good from an investor's point of view. And it could also be a competitive advantage for Namibia in this region going forward. We need to have a better understanding of the electricity market, the energy market, regionally with the South African power pool, also domestically in Namibia. We need more data, and we need to develop scenarios that private investors and developers can feed into. Possible offtake is an important discussion. Of course, PPAs and the domestic market is important for investments and developments of these kind of assets, but also private offtake agreements are important. And there was a broad agreement that the new single buyer model is very promising in this regard. It gives you a market-driven way to have an offtake for private investments as well. This could prove very valuable as we go forward. And then, of course, we're very interested in the export possibilities as well. The possibilities of exporting to neighboring countries and the South African power pool. That would, though, take the build-out of interconnectors, but very interesting indeed as well. Then we had a long discussion about the possibility for land concessions, in Namibia. For developers and investors, this is an important point. It's also a controversial point, but there needs to be predictability about the projects that you own before you invest in those, before you do the DevEx to develop these kinds of projects. We also had a discussion about grids. Grids is the precondition for investments in these kinds of assets. We need to, as I said before, strengthen the interconnectors to neighboring countries. That would give Namibia the possibility of becoming an exporter and not an importer of energy. Huge potential there. The national grid needs to be developed. A lot of investment needs to come into that one. And then we need to discuss how to connect to the big power-to-X projects, the big hydrogen projects, because those projects are standalone projects with massive power generation attached to them. That should also benefit the national grid in Namibia and not only for export purposes as well. Finally, the supply chain, something we discussed very much in Europe. That comes with a big challenge. There will be a fierce global and regional competition around the supply chain. It's a question of availability, and it's also a question about price. That needs to be taken into account and be planned for as well. In this connection, transparency and predictability about the demand for local content are very, very important for investments as well. So a big shout out to that one as well. And then we need access to skilled power as well, as we heard earlier today in one of the interventions. Finally, a small note on partnerships, which we were asked to discuss as well. Making those ends meet, because we talked about big integrated energy systems. It takes a broad public-private partnership to make that happen. Partnership between authorities, politicians, the TSOs in Namibia, international investors, local pension funds, developers, the industry, etc. Everybody needs to be around the table to make this plan come true. I think we had some experience with that in Denmark with the climate partnerships, the green and energy partnerships, and it actually made us capable of connecting some of the difficult nuts in that regard.